In my head, you have held me in your arms. In my head, I've been witness to your charms 1,000 times. You have sung me a love song in my
Hello, you're welcome to the 23rd episode of the Attic Sessions, and today we're actually celebrating a very special anniversary, namely the 20th birthday of one of Ireland's preeminent literary journals, The Stinging Fly. And we're doing that in the company of its co-founder and editor, Declan Meade. Declan, you're very welcome to the
Hello,
Attic.
Vanessa, thank you.
And I'll get to the bit about starting the magazine in a minute, but tell us a bit about your own background. You, I recall, were a fiction writer yourself. How did you start writing?
Okay, well, I moved to Dublin in 1995 and I'd grown up in County Louth, studied in Northern Ireland in Coleraine and spent...
Business
studies,
didn't you?
European business studies, German. I was preparing for the single European market.
Oh, very good.
But by the time the single European market arrived, I was just graduating and I didn't want to work in business. So I went to America. I got a Morrison visa and I went to America for what turned out to be 10 months, and I worked in a bookstore in Atlanta, Georgia. And I had never lived in Dublin because of studying in the north. And so I just had this feeling that I wanted to try living in Dublin before I kind of settled in anymore in Atlanta, which had been starting to do. So I moved back to Dublin and I got a job in the James Joy Centre, and it was a community employment scheme at the time.
And were you writing fiction at that point?
I was interested in writing fiction, so coming to Dublin I started doing, I joined a couple of writers groups, and I would have gone along certainly around that time to probably the Dublin Writers Workshop.
Oh yeah.
And joined a couple of groups, did a couple of courses in the Irish Writers Centre. And I was trying to write short stories. That's what I was interested in doing. And it was really from that experience of meeting a lot of writers around that time, who were all, in a similar situation to myself, like starting out writing, and we'd get together and we'd talk about the situation, and it was just a real strong feeling that there weren't that many outlets.
Yeah, because that was the thing that was, taken for granted, that you had a better chance if you were writing a novel or writing a poem of getting it somewhere than a short story. So
yeah, absolutely. So I met quite a few writers who were frustrated by the situation, and then I suppose a little while later, I listened to this complaint maybe for 2 years or 18 months, and then I had a friend, Aoife Kavanagh, who had just done and she worked with me for a while. I'd known her family before. Her sister was a good friend of mine, and she had, Aoife had done the publishing masters in Galway, NUI Galway, and she worked with me in the Joy Centre for a while as well, and she was trying to get experience in publishing. And then so between the jigs and the reels, the two of us came upon the idea of just setting up a magazine and giving it a go.
And that was 1998, wasn't it?
It was 1997,
okay.
Late 1997, that we decided to do it and put out the submission call, and got the submissions in, and then it was early March 1998 that we published the first issue. And
do you remember what was in the first issue?
Yes, I do. We've recently just put it up on the website, all of the content from the first issue, but I think it was 5 fairly short stories and 16 poems, and 2 of the stories were by writers that I knew myself from a writers group, one of the writers groups that I was in. So it was Michael Wynne and Bruce Carlin, since deceased, but a good friend of ours. But he, so they had submitted stories among the stories that myself and Aoife read through, and the poems. And I suppose one of the things that was, because I came out of it from the point of view of wanting to have an outlet for short stories, but we, from the, in the beginning, certainly we got more poems than stories, because poets seem to always have a poem at the ready.
Oh, we do, and we're desperate for publication. So
the poems streamed in, but the stories came in sufficient numbers as well, and it was just a matter of choosing. And I think myself and Aoife had said that, you know, we won't do this unless the work is there and justifies us doing it. But the work was of a standard that we wanted to publish, and we were excited to publish the first issue.
Though presumably from the get-go, because the difficult thing, once you put your head over the parapet and become a chooser rather than a submitter, there are the people who you can't choose. So how did you deal with the you know, because not just poets, all writers can be disgruntled if they don't get selected. So was that a kind of a challenge, trying to?
I suppose it was a bit of a switch, but I hadn't really. Wasn't even at the stage where I was submitting all that much work myself. So I mean, I hadn't gone through the rounds of rejections myself.
So you could be harsher in turn.
Possibly, yeah. Or, but also I just believed in, you know, that it was going to be about the work itself. Yeah. So, and, you know, I'd have to say that, you know, obviously you get disgruntled people, and we still encounter them. But for the most part, people really understand that and appreciate what you're trying to do, and they like the idea of it. And then as long as they see, when the finished product is there, that there's a good mix of authors represented, and that there is, you know, that the quality is of a standard, well then they can, you know, they can judge it on that basis as well.
You did establish that sense of it being a journal that you wanted to be published in quite quickly. It was sort of like, you know, it was a sense of achievement if a poem or a story
well,
were chosen.
I mean, there were a couple of things we wanted to do. I mean, one of them was that was that it would be an attractive publication from the start. Now, our ideas of what an attractive publication has developed over time, of course, and as has our kind of, I'm sure, my aesthetic and my sense of what makes a good story or not. But yeah, we wanted, I was kind of also aware of people reading the magazine and that they would get something from it, and so that it wasn't going to be just a list of names of people I knew, that it was going to be that each individual piece in the magazine was something that people would want to read and would come away thinking that they'd want to read the magazine again. So that was very important.
So you were publishing and increasing frequency of publication over the years, and then something happened in 2004, because you say on your website that you nearly decided to stop it all.
Yeah.
So what happened at that point?
Well, in the beginning we started to do, we aimed to do 3 issues a year. Now Aoife only did the first 2 issues with me, and then she got sense and got a life and moved away. But so I carried it on, and it was on the strength of the fact that, you know, the work was coming in. And I suppose, going back, I also hadn't really considered what it was to be an editor. And, you know, so all through those early years when I'd been, you know, when I'd obviously shown that I enjoyed writing and reading, and that I had some kind of talent for it, maybe, that you know, teachers and people like that would have steered me towards being a writer, but nobody had ever said, you know, maybe you could be an editor. That just was a closed world for me, something I hadn't thought of or considered. So it was a discovery on my part that was something that, you know, that this was something I wanted to do, and this was something that eventually took over from the writing for me. So I've forgotten now exactly what the nature of the
Because
question.
Baxter's barking in the background, but he's always part of this process.
I was wondering if that would be edited out. and whether I
Certainly
should-
not. We count on him, his input. And do you think that you actually prefer editing to writing?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. No,
Okay.
I think that's where my actual talent lies.
Okay.
And yeah, I don't have some of the qualities necessary to be a writer.
Which are?
Are we going to go there? I don't think I have the obsessiveness about. I mean, I have that about The Stinging Fly. I have
Yeah.
that about editing and publishing in the way that I do.
Is it an egoism?
No, I think it's. I'm not terribly interested in what I have to say. So I don't write editorials very often,
Mhm.
even now. So so I'm more interested in what other people have to say, but I do love playing with language and playing with sentences and paragraphs, and to some extent I get to do that in editing, but I don't have the hard graft of getting the words out of me in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of have all these wonderful people give me their words, and kind of having a relationship with them and with the text in which I get to offer my suggestions and read closely text and give my opinions on it. And
So was 2004 the year when you discovered that, really?
No, 2004. Oh yeah, that's where I was on this. So it was a case of building up the magazine over time, and it was the 3 issues a year, but extending the number of pages and then broadening out what we were doing. So let's say introducing author interviews and reviews and different aspects into the magazine. So but all this time I was doing the magazine part-time, and we were getting very small amounts of funding, so that I had to work at other jobs in order to live. So I found this frustrating, and I was only able to give so much of my time to the magazine. I had ideas for it, but I wasn't, I couldn't commit myself to it full time, while trying to put food on the table and have a bed to sleep in.
And
a
so many
roof over
people
my head.
so many people working in the arts, it's almost assumed that we don't eat at all. We don't need to. We just do what we do for the love of it.
There was also an assumption that I was somehow come from money or something, which was
the big house in County Louth.
yeah, which was far from the truth. So there was that frustration, and then so I just took the opportunity. One of my part-time jobs at that point was working in the I continued to work part-time in the James Joyce Centre, and so I kind of took on projects for them. So I edited their Bloomsday magazine for a few years, and I also ran the first Davy Byrnes competition, which was 2004. So that was all the Bloomsday centenary stuff. So June 2004, I finished the special edition of the Bloomsday magazine. We announced the winner of the short story competition, Anne Enright, and so it was all leading up to that, and I brought out the 18th issue of the magazine, which was, and it was still A4 at that stage, and I think we got it up to 64 pages or something. And so I had it in my mind that in June I was going to just take a break, and all those things would be finished, and I'd go travelling for a while, and I'd try to figure out what would happen next. So I did say that this could be the end of it, to allow myself that freedom. And I went travelling, and I went around Eastern Europe for a few months, the summer months, and then I moved to Harold's Cross for a couple of months, and I actually got a bursary from the Arts Council that year as well.
For your own writing?
For my own writing, yeah. And that's what killed the writing for me. So yeah, money well spent.
Kill the writing, but sort of possibly spawned the careers of some of the most important fiction writers in the country, because the next year...
Yeah, so 2005, by Christmas of 2004, I decided that, yeah, that was the real test of whether, you know, obviously that was the point where I kind of saw that sitting in a house all day trying to write wasn't rocking my boat.
Yeah.
It wasn't my idea of fun. So I started thinking about the magazine again and formulating a plan. And around Christmas 2004, I met Sean O'Reilly, who I'd interviewed for the magazine in 2003. And he had a manuscript that of a book that became Watermark.
Yep.
And so I said, I'm thinking of setting up the magazine again, but with a press, and that it would be great to read Watermark and see if it would work, if I'd like to put, or see what I thought of it, and then see if what he thought about me publishing it. So he gave it to me to read, and I loved it, and so that became our first book. But when we launched that, we also relaunched the magazine into its second volume, and with a new format, and yeah, so that's what got the press started. But I mean, the idea for the press was it was a great start to have Sean's book to publish. But the idea really for the press was to concentrate on short stories, and
with presumably submissions to the magazine as one of the ways that you might encounter the voices that you...
Well, it became the main way, really, except for the first collection we started working on from around that time, actually, or certainly from 2005 onwards, was I started to work with Kevin Barry on what would become their Little Kingdoms, and I'd met Kevin through the first Davy Byrnes Award when he was shortlisted for that, and he said that he was working towards a collection, and so he started sending me stories. So the idea really with the press and short stories was that I could see that writers were coming through the magazine and were out there who just weren't getting any, in the same way that there was the lack of outlets in the beginning with the magazine. It was
because collections of short stories were not being published in any great numbers, were they?
They weren't, and yeah, so that was just a gap that I could definitely see.
So people like, you mentioned Kevin Barry, Colin Barrett, Mary Costello, Danielle McLaughlin, Claire Louise Bennett.
Michael J. Farrell was also in there.
Yeah. And somebody mentioned to me, when I was talking to people during the week about you coming in, and they were saying, Declan has a really good nose for fiction.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean...
What do you look for?
I suppose... Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm looking... I love reading short stories, and then I'm looking for a reading experience that feels fresh and new to me, and that, you know, that there's... that, like, fiction is... I think is really important because it tells us about our lives, and so the best fiction kind of is complicated and is not straightforward, and is interesting, and you're learning something new that you didn't know before, or you're thinking about something in a way that you haven't thought about it before, and it's asking you questions, and there's just an excitement in reading something that's fresh and well told, and so all the good things that we look for in literature should be alive and present on the page, and it just so happens that my particular love is for the short story, which, you know, so I mean, you can find all those good things in poetry and in novels, but I particularly love the short story, so I go there for it first and foremost.
Now, quite recently, and possibly as a bid to get bums and seats, James Kelman was in the Irish Times talking about his view that Irish writers go for the cushy jobs. They don't try and challenge the status quo. And there's separately been suggestions that contemporary Irish fiction is very middle class, very history obsessed, or dysfunctional family obsessed, or whatever. Would you counter those, or do you think that that's just part of the mix, or what are your views on where we are in contemporary Irish fiction?
I think. I mean, I don't know how to counter it exactly, but I'd agree that the best thing to say with it is all part of the mix. I'm not sure how valid an argument it is, because there, as I see it, there's a lot of great new writers that have come through in the last 10 years, and I know that, let's say, even 5 or 6 years ago or 7 years ago, I might have been asked quite a lot about what's kind of happened with Irish fiction, in that it seemed to have gone quiet for a while, and there was less buzz around it. And now, in the last few years, it's gone the opposite way. Where
the buzz is deafening, almost, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's like there's almost hysteria around it. That so much great new writing, and I think. That's probably unfair to a lot of writers who've just been busily working away as well. So, I mean, certainly there's, so a lot of great writers have come through in the last 5, 6, 7 years, but then there's a lot of hype around that too. So it's kind of,
not getting lost between the hype on one side and just the desire to continue to sort of publish the sort of stuff that you have always enjoyed reading.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't interest me all that much. What is said. I mean, I think writers at different times say things just to be provocative.
Yeah.
Yes. Or they say something out of a sense of their own frustration, or they need to believe a certain thing in order to keep themselves going. So it's a way of spurring themselves on to say outlandish things that that they can't necessarily back up with, texts or facts.
Now, we've been talking about buzz, and certainly as we're speaking this morning, there's been news that your editor, Sally Rooney, current editor of The Stinging Fly, has just been nominated, I think, for 3 different prizes for her wonderful conversations with friends. Yeah. And I wondered about how good are you about stepping back when you have an editor in place who has her own aesthetic, her own, I suppose, desire to shape it in a certain way. Are there creative arguments, or are you very much sort of, I'm back in the background now and I'm looking after the books, and you do what you want to do with the journal?
Oh no, I'm definitely more hands off, but just by virtue of the fact that I have plenty of other things to be doing. So it's we had a meeting last week where it was Sally was asking should she print off the stories that she was close to accepting from the submission round, and I was saying no, there's no need. I don't need to read those. Hopefully I'll read them when they get into print. But or I said if there's any you want me to have a look at, I'll do so. But I've just there's plenty for me to do. Aside from the books, there's also the whole keeping the show on the road, which takes up a lot of time.
Because there are a few related things now, like that there's a regular, quite extensive creative writing course attached to The Stinging Fly, isn't there?
Yeah. So we have a 6-month fiction workshop, which is led by Sean O'Reilly, and then we've been doing summer workshops week-long workshops for the last summer, or for the last couple of summers, and we're planning to do 3 summer workshops this year, all together in the 1 week at the Irish Writing Centre. So
Okay, so the kind of the development role,
Yeah.
the
Yeah, development has become more of a thing for us in the last 5 or 6 years, I'd say. I mean, we've done it informally, mentoring and the workshops, but yeah, it's become much more. It's a core part of what we do now as well.
So putting yourself back into the Declan of 1996-97, who was sort of making the plans to set up the magazine and rattle the establishment a bit. How do you respond to suggestions that, well, you are now very much part of the establishment, and that how do you keep that sense of, or is it important to keep the sense of the outsider who began this when you're making your various plans? And
well, I think it's important that I remain. In a way, I see the magazine as having a personality of its own. So I've, even when it's just been me working on it, you know, people have said, "Oh, are you using the royal we now?" Or it's like, but no, it's like me and the magazine, and it's like, you know, we both we both tend to agree, but I'd like not to disagree with it either. So, you know, so I think the core thing about the magazine is that it's there for new writers and new writing, but also, I mean, it's part of it has been, you know, sustaining my interest in it over the 20 years has been, and part of that has been trying to find new ways to do, or new things to do that we can do that will serve writers better. And so I think I was on a panel in Maynooth fairly recently where it was myself and 2 other literary magazine editors, and I realised at that, and I suppose it confirmed it perhaps for me, that, you know, that because I came at it from somebody who was writing, I mean, I think the magazine and the ethos of the magazine is very much focused on the writer, even though I do very much want to I do value the reader and want the reader to kind of buy into the magazine, and they have to buy into the magazine for it to work. Everything we've done has been kind of geared towards the writer, so it is an outlet for writers first and foremost. So that's what we're about. You know, people can send us their work and we will read it, and we will publish it to the best of our ability, and then the books are there for the short story writers who are at that point where the bigger publishers won't take them on, but we're there to get them through and hope, you know, like I'm often asked as well about the writers that we have published their books, and then they move on to other publishers, and that, you know, and that's kind of a bone of contention among publishers.
We do all the groundwork and then they go on, and somebody else takes advantage of our groundwork.
Yeah, essentially. But like, I do see it as kind of a key part of what we are about. I mean, is that it's our job then to find the next Kevin Barry, Colin Barrett, or Mary Costello, or Danielle McLaughlin, which, you know, so that's our job. So, and then the workshops again are kind of trying, you know, it's in a way a response to submissions and where they fall down, and also workshops generally where they might fall down and where we could perhaps supply something that's missing, which is the kind of more very intense focus on the students' texts, on the writers' texts, so that they can improve the craft.
We had June Caldwell here last summer talking about the huge difference that doing that workshop, the Stinging Fly workshop, made to her.
Sure.
You know, and I think we'd find any number of people saying exactly the same thing.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, they're set up to be quite intense experiences, but I think people do get a lot of value out of them. But then similarly in our in this publishing process, even for the magazine, is like that there is close editing involved on the work to get it to the point where that I'm happy with it and that the author is happy with it, and and we've had a bit of fun just recently now we're working on it. It'll be out next month, an anthology of stories.
This is the 20th birthday.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about this.
Well, this is Stinging Fly Stories, Nessa, and it's myself and I asked Sarah Gilmartin, who reviews new fiction for the Irish Times, to work on the anthology with me. But the idea is just that we went back and looked at all the stories we've published in the magazine since day one and came up with a selection of those, and we've ended up with 40 stories.
Wow.
And that's coming out next month. But yeah, so that so we went back to authors and we're asking them, do you remember this story? And some of them did, with horror. And do you mind us publishing it again? And we did give the opportunity for people to change the stories if they wanted to, and I had another run at them as well. But then some of the writers were, just either too busy or too embarrassed to even open the document again.
Well, I suppose, but it's part of your past, so even if you have moved on in directions, it's still part of what sort of formed you as a writer, I suppose.
Absolutely, and like in choosing the story in the beginning, I would have thought that I would want everything that we publish to to stand the test of time, pretty much. I mean, I don't see magazines as being disposable in that way, in that some people do. So I would hope that the content we publish is there will stand the test of time. And I had another run at the stories as well, and that was interesting as well. I mean, because it probably says about how
do you think your taste has changed?
I'm sure it has, because I'm older now, so I mean, it has to.
Just a little, Declan.
Just a little. I mean, I'm obviously not 20 years older, because
no,
I have got a secret.
Yes, and we're in the attic, so the portrait must be somewhere.
Yes.
Do you have an appetite for another 20 years, would you say? Can you see it going for?
I don't know. I mean, I do have an appetite for another few years anyway, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, handing the reins over to Sally, and she is exactly the same age now as I was doing my first issue. So,
wow. Okay.
So, and I think she also has got the secret about the eternal youth thing as well. So, so she might get another 20 years before she hits 30.
I'm realising that the person we haven't actually mentioned yet, who's also been a key part of the team, is Ivani Hulaoin over in Wales.
Yes, yeah.
The poetry editor, and she's still...
she's been with us, I think, since 2001.
Yeah, making those wonderful choices.
Is it 2000? Yeah, I think 2001, which, that's... Yeah.
Yeah.
And we would have published some of her poetry before that, but yeah, she has been reading a lot of poems. Yeah, I mean, because we take online submissions, or we switched to online submissions finally in the last year, and that just seen a huge increase in the number, and also the kind of spread, because once it goes through submittable, everyone
it comes from everywhere.
Just sees it, and it just comes up. So people aren't always familiar with the magazine, so I'm kind of hoping that might settle down a bit, because we had 700 stories come in that Sally read every one of those.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. So that probably means 350,000 poems then, on the usual ratio of...
Well, fully, no, because it has actually switched around now. So because we've concentrated so much on the short story and got ourselves a reputation for it, that we are actually getting more... Well, we get more people submitting stories than we get. Yeah. So we do take, let's say, 4 poems as opposed to one story. So we end up with... I mean, Ivan will end up with maybe well over 1,000, 1,200 poems maybe to read.
Crikey, that's
for an issue.
that's
It is
a lot.
an awful lot.
A lot to read.
Yes.
Well, listen, it's been a pleasure. Absolute
Okay.
pleasure having you. It's the Stinging Fly is something that we always get excited about seeing coming through the letterbox. So I will check my subscription status. I hope it is up to
Very
date.
good, Nessa, thank you.
But well done on 20 years. Well done
Thank
on
you.
all that extraordinary work that you've been doing to make that happen. And
Thank you.
long may you last.
Thank you, Nessa.
Thanks, Declan. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching. We'll be coming back next month with another episode, and hopefully you can join us then.
Nessa, it's Stinging Fly, and to say congratulations to Declan. It's always been such an innovative, brave journal, and that combination of prose and poetry, and also always the editorial is something interesting to say, something different to say, something daring to say. And I suppose I remember when I had 2 poems in the Stinging Fly, the absolute thrill of that. I think it was 6 years ago now, and both poems are in the river, and it's that kind of coming of age feeling when you get your poems accepted in the Stinging Fly. So thank you, Declan.
Declan, 20 years, it's scarcely believable. Many congratulations. It's been an extraordinary achievement, and it's gone from strength to strength over the years. Here's to the next 20.
So happy 20th birthday, Declan.
Okay, so we're with Ruth from Books Upstairs, who's here at the Mountains to Sea Festival. Ruth, what's your experience of the Stinging Fly?
Yeah, oh, it's wonderful. I buy it and read it as well as I can. And congratulations, Declan. Many more years of you have a great nose, and happy birthday.
Hi Declan, this is a bit like the Oscars. I just want to say congratulations on 20 years of Stinging Fly. I think it's a fantastic achievement, and I think you have like a unique ability over the last 20 years of identifying talent, nurturing talent, and giving it a showcase as well, and being hugely successful in all of those ventures with no fuss and no fanfare. So I just want to say well done. You're the gentle giant of Irish literature, and you know, it really, I would even go as far as to say a genius in that regard, and I don't use that word lightly. So congratulations, and here's to the next 20 years.
Yes, I know that I'm just a dreamer. I dream 'cause it's the closest I'll ever get to you.